139 million Nigerians, about 62% of the population, still live in poverty, despite President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's economic reforms. The report released in October 2025 notes that while GDP growth rose to 3.4% and government revenue improved following subsidy removal and exchange rate unification, however, high food inflation at 40% and unemployment at nearly 35% continue to strain households. The World Bank estimated poverty using a $3.65 daily threshold, identified rural poverty at 75.5% and urban poverty at 31%, indicating minimal improvement in living standards.
However, the presidency has dismissed the figures as unrealistic and disconnected from Nigeria's economic realities. Presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga pointed to rise in foreign reserves, which is $40 billion now, and cash transfer programs targeting 15 million vulnerable households as evidence of progress under the renewed hope agenda. Well, joining us now is economist and former head of research at Financial Derivatives Co. We do have Izuchukwu Clement Igbanugo. Thank you so much for being here. Permit me to just go straight into the questions and seeking your answers very quickly on this one. What's your take? So it seems like there are different languages being spoken here. The first language is the language of the Nigerian federal government to the World Bank, which is, we need some money. And then they get the money. And the lender now says, I gave you the money. However, I feel that your people are going through a lot and your, reforms are, working, but it's not getting to the people. And now the federal government says, I'm giving you statistics. Like a different language completely from what the World Bank is saying. We're just trying to make this very simple for our viewers. As an economist, please help us break down the process of what the World Bank has said and what the Nigerian government is now saying, because they borrowed from the World Bank. The World Bank is now telling you it's not working. How come they're saying, no, you can't tell us that it's not working? Is there a disconnect somewhere? Can you shed more light on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to our viewers. The World Bank report is not a surprise because myself estimated about 145 million poor people, and I had a similar conversation with some persons in government some 2-3 weeks ago. And we were arguing, and they were saying, no, poverty has come down and all of that. I said, no, poverty had actually worsened. So I think the World Bank is quite conservative, and it will be foolhardy to fault the World Bank on their computation of the new level of poverty. It will interest you to know that poverty has been on the rise for a decade now. In fact, since 2015, we've not had a reprise in poverty, has been increasing up till this time. And it wasn't in recent time following the reforms, which the World Bank has praised as being bold. And yes, it could be said to be bold, but the implementation was anti-people. And if you have anti-people implementation in your reforms, certainly poverty is going to worsen, because poverty is about capabilities. And so if people do not have the capability to have access to livability, the more people become poorer, all right? And so if we look at the number, yes, the number given by the World Bank, I agree with that number. And I can tell you that most economists will agree with that number. 2, the processes that World Bank used, I wonder how some people are faulted. Let me tell you, the World Bank and IMF have one of the best economic models anywhere in the world. All right. And what the World Bank uses actually for poverty computation, especially for developing countries, is consumption-based approach. Not even income-based approach. It's consumption-based. So they use a survey conducted by the country, in this case, Nigeria, to compute the poverty in the survey year and then adjust it with changes in inflation, consumption, and population trend going forward. And so I can tell you, I can break it down for you here, that by any means you want to look at the tendencies, poverty had worsened in Nigeria and not improved.
Now, Mr. Igbanugo, the government argues that the World Bank's poverty figures are unrealistic. And you've rightly said that, you've said that the World Bank uses very good methodology. But let's talk about food inflation. With food inflation at 40% and unemployment close to 35%, even as reforms are meant to stabilize the economy, do you think the government underestimated the short-term social cost of its policies? Did they really think it through?
The government did not underestimate the short-term social cost. The government did not estimate it at all.
They didn't factor it
in the implementation radar. The government did not think of the consequences of policy actions when those policy actions were announced. Everything we are saying today is an afterthought, and that is why we are in crisis. And let me, before I go to the food inflation, if government is saying that poverty would have, because in their own estimation, they say poverty had decreased, and they don't have a number. But let me give you some analogy. In 2022, before the reform, government said they spent $10 billion on subsidy. Today, $10 billion is equivalent of 15 trillion. So if government said there is no more subsidy, it simply means in literal terms that you have taken 15 trillion from household, from individuals. The people you took that 15 trillion from shouldn't be richer, they should be poorer. That is first layer of evaluation of what subsidy removal means, because subsidy is a reverse taxes. So when you remove subsidy, you impose tax on the people. So you take 15 trillion away from the people. That is number one. Now, if you also look at it from the point of view of inflation, inflation is tax without legislation. That's Friedman, not me. Is tax without legislation. And in 2023, inflation was around 28%. 2024, it was about 33%. And currently is about 20%, the least we've had. Let's take this analogy. If someone earns 100,000 at the beginning of 2023, and that 100,000 could afford 100 tubers of yam. If you have inflation of 28% in 2023, it means that by the end of 2023, the person can only afford about 72 tubers of yam. Now, by the end of 2024, with 33% inflation, the person can only afford about 48 tubers of yam. And in 2025, the person can only afford about 38 tubers of yam, which is 100,000 naira. Will that person be richer or poorer? If I take PMS as a product, let's assume that's the only product that the individual or consumer or representative household in the economy has access to. And in 2022, his 100,000 naira can afford about 500 liters of petrol at 200 naira per liter. Today, he can only afford about 125 liters of petrol. So I do not understand whichever dimension you go, let's even leave model, let's leave calculations. Whichever dimension you're going to look at this, people are to be poorer by those policies. And the only way they will not be poorer is if you provide capabilities to cushion that effect and give them more access to healthcare, education, and food. And these things are nowhere. And so by all examinations, people are poorer by the reform that has been undertaken so far.
Mr. Igbanugo, I want to thank you so much for taking time out to highlight those breaking down that data. But let me wear the hat of the federal government in this instance. I mean, I'm a journalist. We're neutral. We don't dabble in all of that. Our job is to ask the questions and fact check and get the research and the answers. But permit me to just divert and put on the shoes of someone within the federal government. You did say one way that, of course, we can curb this inflation and so on is to provide, the education, the food, and so on. So as a government, let's look at it. I provided TED Fund. There's TED Fund. Students can get loans.
No fund.
Pay for schools and so on and so forth. That's one. Two, I'm going to give 297 billion naira in cash transfers to 15 million households, to significantly impact poverty now that inflation is going high. So when the president in his speech said he was giving, was it 3 billion or 300 billion? Sorry, my head is not at the right place now to remember the figures.
300 billion.
Yeah, 300 billion to 8 million Nigerians and so on. And said they were collecting it in trenches. Some have collected 25,000 naira. Some have collected once, some have collected twice. I don't know if you've seen anybody that's collected. We are still looking for the person who collected. We've asked and asked. We've told people to even comment on this show. Go on YouTube, anywhere, tell us I am a beneficiary so that we can interview you and ask you how you got it. But then again, like I said, I'm wearing the federal government's shoes here. So I provided cash transfers. I've done this through cash transfer programs. I've done this by helping education and so on and so forth. So how come you're still telling me as an economist, even though I feel you broke it down properly, that there's still inflation? I've been able to cushion the effects now.
Or you're disputing the 139 million poor Nigerian figures?
Okay, let's. It's a good example you've cited, especially around what governments say they have done. Maybe later we'll talk about how some other countries that remove subsidy dealt with the issue of subsidy in order to make sure that you don't have household crisis. But let's come back to this. When government say that, because I heard you say government said they spent 290-something billion naira on 15 million households, you say. First of all, how much is 297 billion naira, which I don't even know, like you said. I have very poor people around me, and I don't know anybody who has had access to such fund. Sorry. Who has evidence of receiving such fund. But let's assume that that fund actually went to household. If 15 million household gets share 297 million, it means one household will be getting roughly 20,000 naira a year.
Yes, 19,000 plus. Yes, go on.
In Nigeria, there are 5 people per household. I'm giving you statistics. 5 people per household. If 5 people divide it 20, that is 4. So you are giving each 4,000 naira per person in a year to cushion effect of subsidy removal and inflation. So somebody lost about 70% of his purchasing power, and you're giving him 4,000 naira. In today's Nigeria, what 4,000 naira buy? Maybe 2 packs of spaghetti or 3. And so when government they're giving out some of these numbers, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make economic sense because it's less than 0.1% of GDP. So it doesn't change anything. Even if anybody receives it, it doesn't change anything. When you talk about the student loan, it's very interesting. But the question is how many people receive this and what is the percentage of these people? Because you're talking about vulnerable people. When you just scrape the surface, and say, oh, we have done this, we have done that, it doesn't go anywhere. And that is why most countries that are embarking on policy reform make sure that they do not distort prices. Because when you distort prices, you erode people's purchasing power, you make them poorer, and they may not recover in years. That is it. But the day that Mr. President announced subsidy is removed, it was just, there was no committee, there was no engagement, nobody has studied the subsidy dynamics. It was his first day in office and it took effect. And for the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this issue will keep rolling on. And that's not just the problem. The problem is even the quality of spending. When government has, when all this money, because when you are hearing that FAC has doubled, Why FAC is doubling is because household money has been taken from them and has been given to government, either in form of subsidy or in form of exchange rates, devaluation. It is household money that government has taken. This money government has taken, are they plowing it back to the spending stream? No. So the household are not getting this money back. And what has government done to provide health care? The statistics is still staggering that there are more Nigerians today that cannot have access to health care than in 2015. What has government done to guarantee food security? The statistics is saying that in 2015, 90 million Nigerians were moderately and severely food insecure. Today, there are 160 million. So that number has almost doubled. And so if you look at all the pillars of livability, you discover that things are not getting better. There are more students, children that are out of school today because their parents cannot afford to keep them in school. And then you keep hearing of free education and all of that. If it is said that a pipe-borne water has been provided for a community, and that community is still going to fetch a muddy water, is either that pipe-borne water is not is in a place they cannot access, or there is no pipe-borne water. So something is really wrong in the policy scheme. Whatever government is saying that they are providing, the impact is not felt, and that means it's not there. I want you to understand me. There were reforms. These reforms, some of them have very interesting and a good outcome. You have macro stability because of FX reform and all of that. That's very good. So that's very good for business people, like the big guys, not for the small and medium scale businesses that are even having a tougher time today than they had in 2022. But the thing is this, the macro data growth of 4%, the market woman doesn't know about it. And let me tell you, if the economy is good today, if you ask a market woman, he will tell you. If you want to know how the economy is faring, just ask a market woman. Because the market woman is the mirror, in fact, is a perfect reflection of economic signals. And so when government is having a narrative different from the narrative that every other Nigerian is aware of, then it's something to worry about. But let me ask, if government celebrated World Bank's report saying that government has taken bold steps and that investor confidence is improving, why is government faulting the report that is saying that more people are poor?
Because this has negative connotations.
Yeah.
Now, let's, just before we begin to wrap up, from our conversation today, where you said that the government failed to plan for the day after taking those bold reform steps. It was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. And you also said there's something wrong in the policy scheme of the government. Now, looking ahead, what concrete steps, because you did also mention the positives that the government is doing, but I want to know what concrete steps or policy adjustments you would recommend to ensure that future reforms translate into real improvements in living standards of ordinary Nigerians, not just better macroeconomic indicators. Like you said, it's good for the big boys, but if you ask the market woman, what does a 4% GDP growth mean to her? Absolutely nothing. So is there still time to adjust and change things a bit? And what will be done so that ordinary Nigerians like Joe and I, and maybe you, can also feel the positive effect?
That's very good. Thank you very much. That would be very interesting, and maybe some other times we'll have good time to have a kind of a good deep dive into what Nigeria needs to do. But the fundamental is this. I think we need to change, one, our conceptualization of governance. You know, both government and a lot of persons within government corridor advising government believe that going markets, adopting market economy means no subsidy, less welfare. That is bad economics. Let me be very frank. There is no economy in the world, because sometimes when I hear government talk about we remove subsidy on electricity, we remove on this and that and that and that, and that is the definition of going market. I wonder, because in 2023, global energy subsidy was about $1 trillion. IEA estimate, not any other person, about $1 trillion energy subsidy. European government as a European Union as a bloc, their expenditure on general subsidy was about $360 billion in 2023. That's about 4% of their GDP. Even the UK, as developed as UK is, spent about $60 billion in 2024 on subsidy. In the US, there is subsidy. In Canada, there is subsidy. These are capitalist economies. So that idea, let me tell you, I have a friend that lives in the US, and he pays about $25 per month for all utilities, electricity, cooking gas, heating gas, Wi-Fi, and everything, water, 25. And there are people within certain income level that will be given houses in those places. So the idea that subsidy is bad economists. Whoever is propagating that idea should know, first of all, that it is bad economics. It's about target and strategy. Number two, government need to shift, because sometimes we are talking about these economies, but the problem is more of political. Government must intentionally shift from agent-centric governance to people-centric governance. If you are not people-centric, poverty, we cannot make gains in poverty reduction, because before ever you come up with any policy, you must have people in mind. There are people that did forex exchange liberalization in other countries, in Poland, in Israel, and I can give you countries and time. But they didn't have the crisis we had because they had people in mind. We didn't have people in mind. Indonesia has been doing subsidy removal since 2025. It wasn't one-off. India removes subsidy, but do you know what they do? They say, okay, the price will now be market-based. So if a liter of petrol is 1,000, market price, everybody should pay 1,000. But they mark the people who are poor. And if the poor buys the petrol for 1,000, they will give you the subsidy equivalent in your bank account. So if the subsidy equivalent is 500 naira, as you are getting home, you are seeing 500 naira in your bank account. So we must prioritize people. Everything you hear about government talk about is, oh, revenue, oh, tax this, oh, get more money. And government, and do you know that government is getting more money and borrowing more and having more fiscal deficit? Because fiscal deficit in 2024 to federal government alone was 15 trillion naira. With the doubling of earning and all of it, it's only the state government that is even having fiscal surplus. The federal government is down 15 trillion in one fiscal year. So fiscal rationalization proper, but for me, two things take away I want us to take here. Maybe later we'll talk about other issues, is government must be people-centered. If you are not people-centered, you are going to have more population. And when we are talking about poverty, I want to make it more graphic. 139 million poor Nigerians means that 1 in every 5 poor people in the world is a Nigerian or lives in Nigeria. But don't remember that in terms of population, it is 1 to every 50 people in the world that is a Nigerian. But in terms of poverty, it is 1 to 5. So in poverty, Nigeria is 10 times higher in poverty ratio compared to the global population. And that is something that should worry everybody. But you cannot solve a problem you do not believe that it exists. Every time you talk about poverty, government say, no, there's no poverty, we are sharing money, we are sharing rights, people are okay. So you cannot solve that problem until you come to the drawing table and accept that there is a problem, and then have a register of people who have that problem. Today, we don't know what the social register is. We don't know the people that their names are in that social register. Government have refused to even provide it to any credible institution in this country to examine. Remember when we had about 3 billion naira that was spent in reviewing the social register. We saw names like names of caterers and names of fashion designers as people who had the contract to review the register. So as of today, we don't even know what that register is. So we need to know the register. We need to understand the problem and mainstream poverty reduction strategy into every program of government. At that point, we will now have conversation on the table.
Thank you so much. The argument of the government is that those in the register, you have to protect their dignity, so they choose to be anonymous. Yeah.
Anyway.
And that is why neither you or I know anybody who ever received those transfers. So at least people should be able to give testimony that, okay, I got it. How will you give to 15 million household? 15 times 5 is 75. 75 million Nigerians receive money and nobody knows about it. So who are they?
Thank you so much. Economist and former head of research at Financial Derivatives Co. Izuchukwu Clement Igbanugo. Thanks for your time. Thanks for breaking it down the simplest form. Responses online shows that your breakdown has seemed to be beneficial to all our viewers. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.